You got to operate in truth, right? Operate in truth. Tell the truth.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Gator Truth Florida Football Podcast. I'm Daniel, and on this episode of the Gator Truth Florida Football Podcast, we're going to take a look at some of the coaching changes that the Gators have had this offseason, and I'm going to tell you a few things I want to see in the spring game coming up this Thursday, 7:30 from the Swamp. But before we begin, if you're listening to this on YouTube, you may notice that this is on video. And I'd like to thank a few people before we begin for helping me out with the video. Definitely first shout out I have to give is Dave Soderquist, who let me know some of the different options that were out there for doing video podcasting and for answering questions and letting me bother him a little bit. And then also several other people watched test video for me, gave me pointers. I've tried to incorporate some of those. I've probably missed a few. So thank you, everyone, especially, those who did take their time and have offered feedback both with this and everything else. So let's go ahead and get into it. And the first thing we have to talk about we did have 3 coaches leaving for the NFL. We had Patrick Toney, our defensive coordinator, and William Piegler, our tight end coach, both left to join the Arizona Cardinals. And we had Kerry Colbert leave, our wide receiver coach, to join the Denver Broncos. And with that said, I wasn't surprised that Piegler and Toney ended up at the Cardinals together, because I have joked several times on Twitter, and you can see this if you're watching this on YouTube, that they are in fact the same person, as I pull photos of them both coaching on the field and their pictures from the UF coaching website. One looks like if you photoshopped the hair a little bit darker, threw on some Clark Kent glasses and said, no, that's the same person. Well, I will not be fooled. With that said, good luck to them. And I'm glad they could at least leave, go to an NFL position, and makes them look like they came from a good spot at UF. That does make us look good when our coaches can jump up to the next level. Replacing our defensive coordinator is Austin Armstrong. He comes to us from Alabama. He was the defensive coordinator at Southern Miss last season. However, in the offseason, he was hired by Nick Saban to become the linebackers coach, and many have speculated he was going to be groomed into their new defensive coordinator. However, that did not happen, because about a month and a half after he landed in Tuscaloosa, Billy Napier came calling after Patrick Toney informed Billy Napier that he was leaving. And with that said, he left Alabama after only a month and a half to come to Gainesville. One thing I do like about him is that he believes adapting his system to his players, and I can't tell you how much that can pay dividends. One example we've seen at Florida is in 2005, after Florida lost to LSU, Urban Meyer, Dan Mullen decided, you know what, the players we have, including Chris Leak, may not be the perfect fit for what we want to do offensively. We can either force a square peg into a round hole, or we can adapt our offense a little bit. And then we all know what happened in 2006. And that's just one example. And there are many of coaches being willing to adapt their schemes to fit their personnel rather than trying to force it. And last year, I do think there was some criticism. I know I gave some of, at times, it's not doing things that best fit our personnel. And so that's one thing I like about Austin Armstrong. And I want to compare the defenses between Southern Miss and Florida a little bit from last season. Last year, Southern Miss gave up 372.2 yards per game. It was good for only 59th in the country, but that's still much better than the 411 yards per game that Florida gave up. that was 97th in the country. One game that really sticks out to me about Southern Miss that I did watch last season was when they were going toe-to-toe with Miami. If Southern Miss offense could have gotten the job done and helped them out a little bit, then I think these numbers are a little bit better because Miami did start to pull away in that second half when the depth became an issue. But during that first half, Austin Armstrong's defense was taking it to Miami's offense. And for rushing yards per game, Southern Miss allowed 138.2, which is 47th in the country. Again, numbers we want to see higher than at Florida, but when compared to Florida's 175.2 last season, including that finished us at 100th in the nation, we will gladly take that upgrade. In fact, if we were 59th in the nation in yards per game last year, like Southern Miss was, we probably end up 9-3, if not a little bit better. And you've heard me say it before, the three games I'd say for sure that would apply to are Tennessee, LSU, and FSU. So, and then you've got the Vandy game, which really wasn't much on just the defense, but that is thrown in there as well. And then the passing game for Southern Miss is very close to Florida's last year. They allowed 234 yards per game. Florida allowed 235.8. Southern Miss was 81st. Florida was 84th. Not too much a difference there. However, there are some passing game differences we will get to. Southern Miss 65th in passing efficiency D. Florida was 87th. Both teams did well in the turnover department. Southern Miss forced 22 turnovers, 17 interceptions and 5 fumble recoveries, where Florida had 24 turnovers, 9 interceptions, 15 fumble recoveries. What's interesting about Southern Miss, and I think this goes to a little bit of Armstrong tailoring his scheme to his personnel. The year before, they had a lot more fumble recoveries, a lot less INTs, where last year it seemed to flip, but still lots of turnovers, very similar to what we saw from Patrick Toney. That's one thing I do have to give him credit for. Florida was high up on number of turnovers in the nation. And I can say this as well. If we can force 17 INTs while keeping it like 10 to 12 fumble recoveries, I will gladly take that. And I said the passing game, there are a few stats that yards per game doesn't really account for. And one of those is Southern Miss had 44 sacks last season. They averaged 3.38 sacks per game and were 5th in the nation. Florida only had 23 sacks, averaging just 1.77 per game and finished 98th in the nation. So there's a big difference between if you're giving up, 230 something yards passing, but you're getting, 3.5 sacks per game, as opposed to 1.75 or whatever sacks per game. Because, yeah, you may give up a few more yards, but it's because you're giving up on 3rd and 20, possibly 15 yards, but you're still making that stop. And speaking of stops, Southern Miss had 108 tackles for loss last year. Good for 3rd in the nation with 8.3 per game. Florida only 70 tackles for loss, 5.4 per game, 80th in the nation. So again, another number that, while some numbers are similar, there are numbers that give me hope that he's doing this at Southern Miss without much depth. Not saying we have a ton of depth at Florida, but we definitely have more. And as far as talent comparisons, Florida's talent compared to what it faces overall in its schedule is a lot more comparable than I would say Southern Miss in its schedule, especially when it faces teams like Miami, who have a lot more talent and depth on paper. And then the big one, of course, 3rd down percentage, Austin Armstrong, Southern Miss, 50th in the nation. Again, we want to be higher, but they allowed a first down on only 36.4% of 3rd downs, where Florida was 3rd from last in the nation, 129th, giving up 49.7%, almost a 50% chance of getting a first down against our defense last year. Replacing Piegler at tight ends coach is Russ Callaway. Callaway was an analyst last year. He's now being promoted to an on-the-field role, so as the tight ends coach. And so that's good. what I really like about Russ Callaway, and don't get me wrong, tight ends coach can be important, but of all the offensive positions, not the biggest thing I'm going to freak out about promoting an analyst, but this is a guy who from 2016 to 2019 was the offensive coordinator of Samford. Yes, the same Samford Bulldogs. So in 2021, dropped 50 some odd points in the swamp. Now, he wasn't there for that. And there's a whole different litany of reasons for that, including players kind of blowing the game off because Todd Grantham had been fired that week. But with that said, this is a guy, while he was at Samford, had an explosive passing offense. In 2018, they were 392.7 yards per game. Billy Napier, I don't think, has been above 260, 270 yards passing per game as a play caller. And I bring that up because this is a guy who can bring new concepts, who has done it. And it's easy to say, well, they played at FCS. Well, yes, Samford also had FCS players. Samford isn't exactly the biggest player. It's not like they're the Alabama of FCS either. And Russ Callaway's quarterback at Samford did set a record for most passing yards by an FCS quarterback. So definitely something that a guy who can help out and give new ideas as an on the field role. And I do like that. Hopefully we see some of that. And a number that also stood out to me as I was looking at his numbers from Samford, a 90% red zone scoring offense. You guys might remember that last year in the preseason, I talked about how Napier had a lower scoring percentage in the red zone than Dan Mullen did, and that it wasn't too great. And of course, in the postseason, our scoring percentage dropped from 2021 to 2022. Now, one reason for that is Dan Mullen, or not Dan Mullen, Billy Napier's, scared money don't make money, going for it a lot more on fourth down than other coaches do. And the more you do that, the lower your chances of scoring. But then again, when you score higher chances, it's a touchdown than a field goal. So that is another thing about Russ Callaway. Having 90% is nothing to laugh at in red zone scoring. And the last thing I'd say is he has a pre-existing relationship with Billy Napier. They were analysts together at Bama in 2011. What's interesting is Callaway was actually a defensive analyst, while Napier was an offensive analyst and later became the wide receivers coach. And the last coaching change, Kerry Colbert went to the Denver Broncos. And so when he went, we brought back Billy Gonzalez. This is Billy G's third stint as the Gators wide receiver coach. Of course, he was here under Urban Meyer. He was coach with Dan Mullen. And he's coached players up such as Percy Harvin, Lewis Murphy, Odell Beckham Jr. when he was at LSU. I did put Kyle Pitts on the graphic if you're watching the video, because early on in Kyle Pitts' career, he got moved to wide receiver, and Billy Gonzalez did some work that ended up paying dividends when he went back to tight end. So, in fact, there's a good article, as I had remembered it. I was trying to look up where I'd seen it before, and I found a good article that's still up on SI talking about Kyle Pitts training with receivers has paid dividends. And then, of course, Kadarius Toney, a guy who had a magic touch from the time he was brought in by Jim McElwain, but you couldn't really consider him necessarily a complete receiver. And Billy Gonzalez got him to 2020 where he was a complete receiver, and now he's making massive plays in the Super Bowl. So I do have to give Billy Gonzalez credit for all of the things he's done developing guys, but I can't fully give him a pass for the status of the wide receiver room he left. A lot of people, when he was not retained by Billy Napier, talked about, hey, this guy left a room that needs to be upgraded. Hey, Kerry Colbert's a massive upgrade, many of which now are acting like Kerry Colbert, or that this isn't a massive downgrade, despite saying last year it was a massive upgrade. I don't necessarily go on the it's massive one way or another. There are things that each did well. I think this could be good as long as his recruiting aspect is overseen. We can't just be having the taller, slower receivers all the time. We do need him recruiting a variety of receivers. That's what we did in this last recruiting cycle. And I do think he can develop that. And hopefully we see him developing the new weapons we've brought in for him well, as well as guys like Xavier Henderson that he did recruit. And I know that Henderson gave a glowing review of Billy Gonzalez coming back a while ago. So, with that said, those are the coaching changes. Let's take a look at a few things I want out of the spring game. So, first thing I'd want to see is more creativity in the passing game. Last year, I was very unhappy with some things in the passing game, happy with others, but there are things such as the play that we ran a lot, which was have one guy stand in the flat and have two guys running deep routes against 3-4 defenders. The math doesn't work well on that, and the play didn't work well for us too much. And there are also things we didn't really run two main coverage beaters. For those of you that may not know what a coverage beater is, that's certain thing or certain plays or certain types of routes you would run against certain coverages, such as running quote unquote pick routes against man coverage, hoping to get a guy open by running two receivers close to each other, maybe run into one of the DBs, and then now you've got a guy open to catch and run. Or, for example, if you have a cover two, where cover two, for those who may not be familiar, it's where, and I'm just going to use a base of this. I'm not going to get into all the details right now, but if you have two corners that basically cover the flats and up to 5 yards deep, and you have two safeties that split the deep half of the field in half, one takes the right side, one takes the left side, you could run things such as a smash concept where a guy runs a dig route and another one runs a corner route that is behind the corner who's got to come up on the dig route or the stop route. And then the guy running the corner is in front of the safety, running towards the sideline, but behind the corner. And it's just perfect way to get in to this open space in the zone. We didn't really do too much of that last year. Hopefully we see more of that. And that's one of the things that guys like Russ Callaway coming in, Billy Gonzalez, who's been part of some successful offenses coming in, maybe they can help with that creative side. Billy Napier is great at having a great run game. If we could have a good passing game on top of that, then that is something that will work. And these are things that you can see, the coverage beaters, and whether you're running this, one guy staying in the flat type play, those are things even on spring game you can tell because you're seeing how it's working, as opposed to, hey, they are playing against second string. Well, yes, pushing around second string, that can be seen. But what routes you're running against what defenses, that's something that doesn't matter who your opponent is. And I also want to see less routes running in front of the others. Example of this, and it happened a few times last year, the 2-point conversion play or the first 2-point conversion play against Tennessee, where I believe is Zipper is running across the field. We're trying to hit the guy in the back of the end zone, but because of the way the play was designed and the cross route, he thinks the ball's coming to him, reaches up, tries to snag it, ball falls incomplete. I do want to see some accurate passing from both Mertz, who comes in from Wisconsin, and from Jack Miller. An example, I'm not trying to dog on Miller, but something that you can tell, no matter if it's against backups or not, is last year, a lot of Miller's passes looked like they were back shoulder throws, even when they shouldn't be. And there's been a few videos from spring practice where it looks like he's done that a few times this year. And the reason is you got to make sure your ball placement's good. That was one of AR's problems. And I need to see that from Mertz, that he's doing good with the ball placement. Same thing with Max Brown, and of course with Jack Miller. And then I also want to see some sound defense, good fundamentals like the outside guys maintaining the edge. Again, whether you're first team, second team, going against first team, second team, maintaining the edge, not cutting inside, not running too deep. Things like that are fundamentals you can tell no matter who you're playing, whether we're playing, Charlotte or playing Tennessee. Now you can see the guy trying to, and if they get blocked out of it, that's one thing. But there are times last year guys would go into hero ball, try and cut in, and guys would go around them to the outside, or they get too deep and guys would cut in between them. But doing that, holding the edge, and I say holding the edge, there's other fundamentals, but I'm giving that for example because that'll help shut down some of the run game or rushing yards we give up, because it'll funnel things more towards the inside, which gives more ability for our linebackers and safeties to come in and make plays before the guys 6, 7 or more yards down the field. And then also I want to see more of the linebackers and defensive backs coming downhill. A good example of this is last year we saw Jordan Young, I believe it was, on the last play of the first half, or I think it was the last play of the first half, where the ball is thrown in the short. Jordan Young is 5, 6 yards steep, just runs forward and boom, hits the guy, drops him either for a loss or right there at the line of scrimmage. It's just playing fast, playing aggressive, and laying the boom. If you wait for the offensive person to come to you, they've got all the physical momentum, and that can lead to more broken tackles, which we've had problems with. It can lead to more yards gained, because if it's two people hitting each other with about the same momentum, yeah, maybe if the offensive player has a little bit more momentum, a little bit more power, they may get 1 or 2 yards. But if we're flat-footed or trying to catch them at like a side angle, they're going to pick up an extra 3, 4 yards if they go down, and there's no guarantee they do. So I want to see our guys reacting and reading and going forward and taking them down. And again, whether you're playing a first team offense or you're playing a walk on offense, a guy seeing it, reacting, going downhill is just, in some ways, it's an instinct that you can see, rather than just something like, oh, here's a play call, or whatever. So that is something that I do want to see from our team, and we have done a great job, at least seeing it from some players last year. Again, Jordan Young, I'm sad he transferred because he played with that fire at times. Miguel Mitchell, who will be stepping into a safety role, he did that. And so hopefully we see more of it from a lot of our team, and we see a lot of more physicality from this defense. So with that said, I look forward to seeing the spring game on Thursday. Hopefully I'll see some of you. If you see me, please come up, say hi. I love talking to other Gator fans. And I know there are guys like Gator Josh who I've hung out with at games, and good guy. Definitely, if you see him or his son, say hi. I don't know if he's bringing his son with him or not. I'm sure he'll text me and say what, no or yes. But always, again, spring game, it's on a Thursday, is what it is, but it's also a good time to just sit back, have fun, and cheer on the Gators, see what we have coming up. Who knows? We might see something that surprises us. You never know what we're going to get. Sometimes spring games have all sorts of surprises. If you are going, let's create an atmosphere that will impress the recruits. I know I say that about our games during the season, and now I'm saying it about our games here during the off season, or our spring game. But that's why it's on Thursday, is to give us all the eyes we can on us. Before I go, I do want to give a shout out to my friends at Alvarez Lawn Care. The summer is coming up, and as it's coming up, the grass is going to be growing faster. Weeds are going to be growing. It's going to be hot outside. You may or may not feel like mowing your yard or doing that landscaping project that you really want done. Definitely give my friends at Alvarez Lawn Company a call. They service all of Central Florida. And again, give them a call at 407-409-2617, or you can reach them at their email address at alvarezlawncompany@gmail.com. Alvarez Lawn Company, they are building plans that work for you. And with that said, everybody, I hope to get better at this video thing for those of you that watch. And for those of you listening, thank you all for listening. And as always, go Gators.